What is the creepiest thing you've witnessed that convinced you of the paranormal world? Part 2. 1. I worked nights in a 100-year-old museum, a place with historically significant artifacts and a lot of lore about its construction and the architects who designed it. One night, I was alone near one of our theaters, hours after closing. No one else was on that side of campus. I heard a woman scream as if she were being attacked, and I got goosebumps. I checked the entire area, but there was no one to be found. Though alarmed, I carried on and entered another area with office spaces. As I walked through, pieces of paper fell off desks, the area felt cold, and I had the heavy feeling of being followed. I entered an elevator, and it felt like someone was breathing down my neck. I ran from the area, and the feeling went away. That happened about 10 years ago. The same scream was heard again last week by one of my employees. We searched the area again. No one was found, but my employee was so spooked she was shaking. 2. I was sitting with my friend on his front porch, having a conversation that slowly came to a stop when we noticed something strange. He lived on the corner of an intersection, and the street on the left side was on a moderate incline. On the horizon, about 50 yards away, was a shabby man on a bicycle. This was normal for the area where my friend lived, but this time something was off. The speed he was moving was unnaturally slow for a bike, yet he wasn't struggling to keep it upright. Initially, as he made his way closer to us, we noticed a few ravens following him. But as he got slowly closer and closer, more and more ravens made their way over the horizon and into our view. After about 30 seconds, the full picture came into view and we couldn't take our eyes off what we saw. The man was being followed by the single largest flock of ravens I've ever seen in my life. There were at least 1,000 of them. And they quickly crowded the street my friend's house was on, landing on every available surface, flying very low and slowly, following the shabby man on the bicycle. I would have thought perhaps he had been feeding them, but as they approached, we could see this was not the case. Finally, he reached the intersection where the house was, and a silence fell upon the air like when it's snowing heavily, despite the fact that his house was in the city and it was broad daylight. Then I got a good look at the man. He was the palest person I've ever seen, with thick black circles under his eyes, and he was terribly thin. Despite all this, he appeared strong and confident. As he passed us, I felt a sense of dread and my friend's dog ran back into the house with her tail tucked. Soon we were inundated with ravens landing all over the front garden and on the deck where we were sitting, some even on the railing I had my arm on. They simply didn't care we were there. Their eyes were just fixed on the man. He slowly made his way past, and the ravens followed behind him. As he disappeared down the hill to the right, I felt better, and I could suddenly hear the traffic again. To this day, several years later, my friend and I are convinced the dude was the devil. 3. I've had a few experiences with ghosts, but there's one that really stands out to me. I got a promotion at work and bought a nice bottle of whiskey to celebrate. My partner and I opened it later that night and started to have a few sips when we heard a bang behind us. We couldn't immediately find the source until we saw a dent in the ceiling that perfectly fit the walking stick that was now on the ground below. A little freaked out, we finished our drink and started to head to bed. On the floor, we found a folded note that said "You forgot" in handwriting that didn't match either of ours. We checked the house, but no one else was there. Unsettled, we sat in bed for about 15 minutes while we heard knocking on the walls. Then it hit us. My partner's brother had passed away a few years prior and loved whiskey. We always poured out a shot for him when we opened a new bottle, but we hadn't done it this time. We both got up and went to the kitchen to open the bottle. Once we uncorked it, the cork flew off the counter and sailed a good 15 feet before rolling away. We turned to get it when a flash of red erupted behind us. We poured the shot and had a small toast. Then we poured his shot out outside. We came back into a calmer house and heard knocking on the cabinets and walls. He knocked intelligently and answered questions. Then he just kept knocking as we tried to sleep. He finally stopped when we told him to fuck off and let us sleep. He came back on multiple other occasions. I've seen smoke behave strangely around him. I've seen objects move and I've felt hands on me that weren't there. He was free to come and go and visited us a lot. We eventually moved out of there and he doesn't show up nearly as much. But he certainly made living there interesting. 4. I lived in a house that was haunted or possessed when I was in high school. You would hear footsteps right beside you when no one was there. I'd hear footsteps in my room at night. If I turned on the lights, they'd stop and they'd start again immediately if I turned the lights out. It always felt like you were being watched, and sometimes it felt like you were being followed as you walked through the house, as if someone were looking over your shoulder. I had my guitar and stereo locked up in the basement, which was only accessible from an outside door. My mom heard them playing and went down there when she got home. The door was still locked. My guitar was still in its case, and my stereo was quiet. I had the most bizarre dreams when I lived there, usually about mirrors. Something pulled my mom and dad's covers off their bed while they were asleep. My mom assumed that dad had turned over and dragged the blanket downward. She pulled them back up and laid down, and something immediately pulled the covers completely off onto the floor. My niece spent the night there sometimes and dreamed she was floating above the bed and that her nose touched the ceiling. My niece was watching TV and thought she heard chanting. She'd turn the TV down and not hear the chanting. It wasn't on the show, she was watching a sitcom. The smoke detector in the basement would go through batteries in a few days and start the annoying replace battery beep. When I tried to play my electric guitar in the basement, the strings shocked me. I've never had that happen anywhere else. The batteries in my guitar effects pedals would also be dead in a few days. You would hear things and not know where they came from. My niece was in the basement and had something run around her in circles, but she couldn't see anything. She just heard the steps. My mom heard something running around down there when no one else was home. A few days before we moved, my mom saw a gray, human-shaped smoky figure walk through the living room while we were packing. She didn't mention it until after we moved. 5. I've had several experiences over the course of the years that could be termed paranormal, for lack of a better explanation at this point. However, this location was the source of most of them. 20-some years ago, I was living near the Canadian border alone in a rented log cabin. It used to be part of a fishing resort and had been renovated since it was built in the early part of the century. The cabin was approximately half a mile from the nearest neighbor and 15 miles from the nearest town, so I'd gotten used to isolation fairly early on. At the time, I was working PM shifts at a resort 25 miles away and wouldn't typically get home until well after midnight. On this particular night, I had gotten home, put on my pajamas, and gone into the kitchen area to wash dishes. I was standing in front of the sink, looking out the window onto the woods, when directly behind me, just above the height of my head, there was the sound of a man's whistling. Just 2 notes, and then nothing. I positively froze. I looked in the reflection of the window in front of me and saw nothing. Very quietly, I wrapped my hand around a totally inadequate knife that was in the sudsy water and turned around. Nothing was there except for my 2 cats sitting by the wall, looking directly into the air behind me where the whistling had come from. This kicked off many extremely odd experiences in that cabin that continued until I moved out some 6 months later, but that one was by far the most shocking, simply because it was completely unexpected. I spend a great deal of time alone in isolated locations, but since that evening, I have thought long and hard about what it means to be a woman alone in the woods from a safety perspective. 6. We moved a lot when I was a kid, but only in one house did we experience this stuff. It was a fairly old home, maybe 50 or 60 years old. I slept on the couch downstairs a lot. There were no bedrooms on the main floor, and it was very loud for someone to come downstairs. I would hear the cupboards opening and closing almost every single night between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m. My dog at the time would awaken randomly, jump up and stare down the pitch-black hallway, growling with his hair standing up as if he was about to attack something. Everyone in the family was away except for my mom and brother. My brother was on the couch and saw an older man poke his head into the living room, look at him, and pull back. My mom verified that she heard him screaming as if he was being murdered. Another time, a friend was over in an adjacent room, and an older man poked his head around the corner in the exact same way. No one was home but us. When I came back from the kitchen, he asked me why I had leaned into the doorway just to stare at him. I instantly had goosebumps and told him the story. One night at around 1 a.m., I started hearing a weird noise. At this point, I was almost used to the weird stuff. The noise continued like clockwork every 10 to 20 seconds. Eventually, I got up and flipped the lights on, and I looked down the hallway where my dog would always stare. My remote control car was driving around the hall, would hit the wall, reverse, and then drive around and hit the wall again. This went on for at least 2 hours before I looked. The kicker. When I saw the toy doing this, I flipped out and ran past it to get upstairs to get my parents. I grabbed the car, flipped it over, and its tires instantly stopped moving. My mom came down with me to humor me, thinking I was an idiot. We picked up the controller for the car and it didn't have batteries in it. So how was it driving for hours? 7. I live in San Francisco, and many years ago some friends bought a beautiful old Victorian house that needed a lot of work. Our friend group all pitched in on weekends and such, helping them out when we could. In one of the rooms was a closet that had been painted shut. When they finally got it open, it was basically just useless junk, but there was an old mirror wrapped in newspaper. The paper was from the 1970s and not contemporary with the mirror. An art historian friend said it was probably from the 1920s. It's a beautiful mirror in an oval frame with ivy carved along it. Once the house was done, all the friends that helped were invited up for dinner and the grand tour. They had hung the mirror in their bedroom, directly across from the door. When I walked in, I saw my reflection, and there was a woman standing behind me. Surprised, I turned around and there was nobody there. My friends looked at each other, then at me and said, "You saw her, didn't you?" Apparently, they occasionally saw the woman in the mirror. They had previously tried the mirror in their hallway and never saw her there, but when they moved it into the bedroom, she started showing up. They said she's not always there, and not everyone who has been shown the house has seen her. They also had a dog that wouldn't walk under the mirror. She would walk into the middle of the room but wouldn't go anywhere near where the mirror was hung. I'm not a ghost believer, but I have absolutely no idea what I saw. I'm positive I did see her. If you've had an experience that changed your mind about the paranormal, share it with us in the comments.
Thanks for watching. If you got this far, leave a comment, like if you liked it, and follow for more.